Hey guys, and welcome to my third movie review. I was having a little trouble deciding on what movie to review, and after some deliberation, I decided on a superhero movie. And for those who know me, I'm a fan of superhero films. Not all of them, of course, but still, I think they hold significant meaning. And this story's meaning is something we all need to understand and embrace. So let us get lost into the story. The 2000 film X-Men is the film adaptation of the Marvel Comics superhero team of the same name, which features many of the iconic characters that are well known to these comics, played by an ensemble cast, just to name a few: Anna Paquin as Rogue, Patrick Stewart as Professor Charles Xavier, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Halle Berry as Storm, and marking the Hollywood debut for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. The story really follows Rogue and Wolverine as they try to navigate their way between two groups who have very different beliefs on mutankind's place in the world. We see this story really revealing these characters and them discovering their powers and realizing they are more than just human, and we see their lives slowly connecting with each other. But also the debate and divide on mutankind's place in the world. And this is a very complex issue, as the team in the comics, created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, was inspired by the civil rights movement, the struggle and fight against injustice and bigotry just because one is different. But X-Men, both the comics and the film, present this in a whole new way. It's not just for someone to look different, and of course that is the case for some mutants, but it's overarching into the hatred of all mutants, whether they do or don't look like normal humans. And this is speciesism. Intolerance and discrimination against an entire species. And the usual example of this is how humans attack or exploit certain species of animals. And obviously, cruelty towards animals just because of what they are is awful. And we see this with mutants. Mutants are people. There is a debate on whether or not mutants are really humans or not, but whether they are or not, it is still cruel and vile to hate a being, a person, for being just what they are. This movie really presents a deep matter of self-discovery, tolerance, connection, and personal and systematic hatred. Marie, or better known as Rogue, discovers she has the ability to take one's life force through physical touch, but it causes agonizing pain to the one she comes in physical contact with. And sadly, she discovers this by her first kiss. Horrified by this, she runs away, and she comes into contact with a man named Logan, a mysterious, brash, and antisocial drifter, who she also discovers is a mutant, but also with additions to his mutant nature, which he doesn't understand, which he can't remember how it happened. Later they are attacked by another mutant similar to Logan, and saved and taken to the home of the X-Men. And they come in contact with their mentor, Professor Charles Xavier, a mutant with the ability of telepathy, where we learn from him about Eric Lyncher, now called Magneto. Once former close friends turned adversaries over their differences because of their very different beliefs on humanity. Xavier hopes and believes in peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans, but Magneto believes that there can be no peace through his own personal experience during the Holocaust, where he sees how being different, where he first saw and experienced the true evil capability of humanity for what they don't understand, for what they hate. And Charles Xavier and Magneto both represent major leaders of the civil rights movement. Professor X was inspired by Martin Luther King Jr., and Magneto was inspired by Malcolm X. As we know, Martin Luther King campaigned and hoped for acceptance and peace. Malcolm X believed in violence when necessary, and that the oppressed should live apart from the oppressor. But Professor X and Magneto have their own unique views. Xavier created the X-Men as a means of defense for both mutants and humanity, using violence when necessary. Magneto believes in survival of the fittest, that only the strong should survive, and the strong are mutants, and he is willing to fight for what he believes mutants' place to be by any means necessary. As the audience, we're supposed to be aligned with the X-Men, but also realize where Magneto is coming from. As humans, we'll be inclined to side with a side that believes in peaceful coexistence, but should realize the evil that humanity has done and is still very capable of doing. Because mutants are treated as lesser beings, humanity in the past and still does treat others within our own species as lesser beings, whether for the color of skin, whether because of religion. With mutants, it's because they are another species, another race, another people. And we shouldn't deny that humanity hates and fears what it doesn't understand. and Magneto knows of the evil humanity is very capable of doing. As the movie progresses, we see through the characters, both mutant and human, but mostly mutant, the conflict of how mutants really fit into the world. Unfortunately, we have the character Senator Kelly, who hates mutants and wants to create a mutant registration. Anyone who is a mutant to be known and identified so that people know, as he would perceive it, as the scum in society, which reflects the undesirables in Nazi Germany, which can be presented as human history repeating itself. And Magneto seeks to prevent this, as he has two of his allies, Mystique and Toad, kidnap Senator Kelly. And once Senator Kelly is taken to an island, Magneto uses a machine that he created to turn Senator Kelly into a mutant. As he puts it, his belief that God works too slow. And this can be seen as evolution from human to mutant is taking too long and is keeping mutant kind in the rightful place in the world. And this machine does mutate Senator Kelly, but he does not survive mutation. And the man realizes too late the oppression that mutants undergo. And it took him to be no longer human to understand this. And we see the reflection of this within certain mutants' hatred and fear of humans. Magneto is obviously the main one, but we also see this in some of the X-Men themselves. Specifically Storm, from herself undergoing oppression from the worst of humanity and seeing her brothers and sisters hated and attacked. Her fear of humans has also altered into hatred, and this is what hatred does. And this can reflect the true terrible acts that humans are capable of doing for what we don't understand. Mutants are people. They're just not human people. And Logan later actually tells Storm, after Magneto has taken Rogue, that her and that the X-Men are wasting their time by protecting those who hate and fear them. And he says Magneto is right, a war is coming. And Logan questions her if she really has chosen the right side. And we see the effects that this systematic and personal hatred and fear can cause people, whether human or mutant, to make decisions that could have terrible effects. Magneto is a survivor, a victim of oppression, but we see that his hatred and his belief in the strong survives. Despite his intentions for mutants to have a place in the world, it would cause more suffering, and we see him becoming what he hates. Of course, this doesn't excuse what he tries to do to Rogue. It just reveals his belief and value in survival, that people should do what is necessary to stay alive and thrive. And with Rogue, she is a means to an end. He doesn't hold any ill will against her. He just wants to live, but because of his single-mindedness, he doesn't realize what the machine would do, despite the warnings of the X-Men. And X-Men really presents these key characters trying to understand their place as a mutant in the world and how they connect into the larger mutant community. Rogue is scared, understandably. Her power does hurt people, and that would be traumatizing. And with Logan, it's him trying to rediscover himself, because for years his memory has been missing. And given Xavier's word, he promises if Logan helps the X-Men against Magneto, he will help him to restore his memory. And we see Logan slowly trying to find his place there, because he's a loner. He has a hard time connecting with others, which parallels Rogue's story, because later we see so many of the other mutant children are afraid of her because of her power, and that's a sad thing, to be feared by those who should be able to understand you. And her situation isn't helped when Mystique tricks her into believing she's not welcome at the school. Of course, that isn't true, but Rogue is used to being driven away. She imagines she had a place there at the Institute, but because of Mystique's deception, she feels that she's an outcast in her own species. And Logan has really bonded with her, and when she goes missing, and later when Magneto takes her, he feels a sense of responsibility, and despite his antisocial nature, he still feels compassion for her, and he sees a little of himself in her, but also because he does care about others. And that's why he is so fierce in trying to save her. He goes through both Mystique and Sabretooth in order to save her. And it's not just Logan. All the X-Men are focused on saving Rogue and also the city. And we do see them struggle, but also still triumph, just with Magneto. His pain and rage. He makes his own mission and his own beliefs just as focused and determined as those of the X-Men. It's just terrible to see what hatred for another species, another people, can and sometimes does lead to. And the stories and struggles of mutants does reflect what Stan Lee based the X-Men off of. The civil rights movement was a struggle for empathy, for understanding, for connection, and for harmony. But of course, there are those like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X who believed what was right for oppressed people, but different people within the civil rights movement believed differently for what was best for people of color. And we see this divide within the characters. Some truly believe in peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants. There were those who hated and feared humans because of how some treated mutant kind, and others wanted humans to pay for what they have done to mutant kind. And there were those who believed that mutants were superior to humans and that their rightful place was at the top of the food chain. Of course, the film does side with Professor Charles Xavier, but we still see the side of the Brotherhood of Mutants of Magneto's perspective. As his life barely had begun, as he lived through one of the worst times in human history during an event that was one of the prime examples for just how evil humans can be. While some humans don't like to think of ourselves as evil, as monstrous, so many of us have been, and so many of us really are. We are more than capable of evil, as we have done so much in the past and still are. And this makes this film still relevant today, and I fear it always will be, because of the divide between people, because hatred between peoples keeps us separated, it keeps us from understanding and coexistence. And while this film and these stories have a very big audience, and many say they'd love to be a mutant, they'd love to have superpowers, I ask, if mutants, like in the Marvel comics and in this film, are or were real and were complete public knowledge, do you really think everyone in the world would look up to them, would love them, want to be them? No. As good as it would be if that were true, it sadly wouldn't be. I mean, how often when we mention beings that are not human, or are human-like, or as one might say, more than just human, how often do many of us not call them monsters, as what we perceive to be monsters as not human? This film's success and its meaning was the catalyst in the X-Men franchise. But some of these films following this story's success, others falling short, and others exceeding it. And this film was truly the catalyst for a re-emergence of superhero films, especially for Marvel. And it wasn't a certain film. Many praise it to be the catalyst, the re-emergence for Marvel films, as it had the complete opposite meaning and heart of this story of X-Men. Well, I hope you all enjoyed my third film review. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm your host, Jeremy Mize, and thank you once again for getting lost into the story with me.